my brother. I've decided to search for more food in the waters.
You will regret this, Pachisitus. The environment will force you to adapt.
I just need some shrimps. I will be perfectly fine.
What the f-
Unless you've been hiding under a rock for the past 165 years, you've probably heard about Darwin's theory of evolution. Some people are against it, saying there's no proof that each animal was created specifically for its habitat, or they're just against it because they can't understand it. So today, we'll be tackling the evidence for evolution and how we can tell that organisms weren't just created, but actually changed over time. Darwin's theory of evolution states that organisms evolve over time from natural selection, which is the process of slight mutations occurring in the offspring of an organism, and the mutated offspring surviving to reproduce and pass on that gene to its offspring over and over until you have a different species, just as long as the gene doesn't die out through breeding or death, because isolation and survival are very important parts of evolution. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the evidence. First, let's look at my favorite part of this whole thing, the fossil record. We can tell that organisms evolved through the fossil record because the Earth's crust is like an onion. It has
layers! Onions have layers.
These layers of dirt and rock build up over time and hold a consistent timeline of life on Earth, containing many fossils if the right conditions were met in that location at the time. From this we can tell what has existed and when, and compare it to other organisms that we have today and see if there's any link in between. One of my favorite examples of this is the evolution of horses from the small forest-dwelling Eohippus to the modern-day speedy and strong animals we have pulling carts and winning races today. And this isn't just a random assumption that links these two different animals. There is extensive evidence throughout the fossil record to show this, with many different fossils making up a huge evolutionary tree for horses and their relatives. Though only 1% of all life will fossilize, and only about 5 to 10% of species have fossilized, as like I mentioned a minute ago, fossilization can only occur if the right conditions are met at the time of the organism's death, as fossilization often requires a lack of oxygen, at least in the early stages of fossilizing, especially for preserving soft tissue. This means that for the best chances of fossilizing, plants and animals would have needed to be quickly buried after, or in many cases during death, in a mudslide, shallow seabed, floodplains, river deltas, swamps, marshes, ash beds, really anywhere where something could be quickly buried without oxygen and kept away from scavenging animals. Anyways, we can also tell that Eohippus and modern horses are related through biogeography. Biogeography looks at the spread of different species across the world, with similar species being closer together and different ones being further away, like how whitetail and mule deer live close together and have overlapping ranges and occasionally breed, and Chinese water deer living farther away and being very different from the other two, and not being able to breed with the American deer species. Now, we can apply this to the example of horse evolution by looking at where the fossils were found. The fossils belonging to this line of evolution are all found in the same general area across North America and Europe, with certain species like zebras, or rather their ancestors, splitting off and migrating towards their current habitats and evolving differently from other equines because of their isolation. This is also where the terms island dwarfism and island gigantism come from, as organisms from the mainland can get isolated on islands and over time evolve to change size to fit their new environment and niche, like how dodos, the now extinct relative of the pigeon, grew to about 3 feet tall from the isolation and lack of natural predators on their island. The isolation of species on islands also allows for organisms to evolve faster than their mainland counterparts, as their isolation means that there are less organisms to pass on different genes, allowing for mutations to accumulate and change the organism quicker than would be expected anywhere else. Comparative anatomy is another way we can tell that animals have evolved over time. In case you can't tell by the name, comparative anatomy is about comparing the anatomy of other animals together to see how similar they are. From this we can see that although these animals are different, we can tell that at some point they were actually closely related through a common ancestor. One way this is done is by comparing bones. For example, mammals like bats, cats, people, and even whales have the same fundamental blueprints of bones in their arms, and, with a few exceptions, all have 7 neck vertebrae. Yes, even giraffes. We can even tell that whales evolved from land-dwelling animals, like seen in the start of the video this way. If you look at a whale skeleton, you can see that they have vestigial leg bones, which are small and fused, yet still show the same mammal leg blueprint. We can also tell that whales evolved from the dog-like Pachycetus because they share the same unique, dense ear bones, which are only found in whales, dolphins, and porpoises, which act almost like underwater antennae, channeling sound to their ear more effectively. We also compare organs in the same way to understand the relationship between different animals, adaptations, and common ancestry, though this can only be done with living animals, as we don't exactly have intact organs of extinct species to work with here. But one way we can tell mammals came from fish in the ocean is that our hearts are similar, though are more evolved and were adapted to life on land rather than in the water. We can also compare things like DNA and chemical processes between organisms, but we'll get back to that. The most noticeable form of evolution comes in the form of artificial selection. Artificial selection is similar to natural selection in that genes get passed down through generations of offspring, though all selection is controlled by humans, happens much faster, and can cause organisms to exist that wouldn't exist naturally, like lighters. Artificial selection, or selective breeding, happens by finding organisms with the traits you want and then breeding them to get the traits you want, such as bigger fruit, specific hunting behaviors, or cosmetic features. A very common example of this is how we selectively breed dogs for different purposes. These cute, lovable creatures descended into their own subspecies from wolves with their domestication from humans, and from there, we have selectively bred them into the different breeds of dogs that we have today. It takes at least 3 generations of selective breeding to produce a new breed of dog, which is a significantly shorter amount of time than natural selection normally takes. This also differs from natural selection because instead of survival of the fittest, it's more like selection of the fittest, as we pick and choose which ones get to reproduce, which, depending on desired traits, can lead to unfavorable traits from the dog's perspective. For example, pugs were bred to have cute, flat faces for purely aesthetic purposes, which caused the dog to have difficulty breathing. Another example would be the cat breed famous for their folded ears, the Scottish Fold, whose gene that caused their cute ears also causes many health issues such as arthritis, short legs, stiff tails, as the gene affects bones and cartilage growth along with other health problems that often lead to them needing to be put down. Our final bit of evidence for evolution is biochemistry, which is a study of chemical processes within living organisms. It's linked to evolution with shared molecular machinery like DNA, RNA, and ATP, universal metabolic pathways like glycolysis and the electron transport chain, and similarities in protein. All life on Earth contains DNA and RNA, except for viruses, which either use DNA or RNA, and prions, which use neither of them. DNA is basically a built-in instruction manual for life, with the genetic code to develop, reproduce, survive, and function. And RNA acts as a messenger for DNA, taking protein blueprints from a cell's nucleus and transferring them to the ribosome in the cytoplasm. RNA also provides structure for cells, increases the rate of chemical reactions, and regulates genes. Universal metabolic pathways are ancient, important cellular processes that occur in almost all living organisms, such as glycolysis and the electron transport chain, which deal with energy. They work like cellular building blocks and help achieve homeostasis. Metabolic pathways are pretty much the same thing, they only occur in certain groups of organisms, like photosynthesis in plants, instead of all of them, which we can compare when trying to group organisms together. We can also look at similarities in proteins in a similar way to DNA, through shared sequences, structures, and functions, which often stem from gene duplication and divergence, leading to families with similar folds, but different specialized roles, which reveal molecular building blocks and convergent evolution, which is when different lineages develop similar features. By comparing all of these shared components between different organisms, we can tell that all life on Earth most likely came from one ancestor as far back as 4.1 billion years ago. This is the last universal common ancestor, or LUCA for short, which suggests that we are all related at some point to every organism on the planet, even though some might be very, very, very far removed from us. In the end, there are so many different ways we can tell organisms evolve rather than just appearing to fill a specific niche, like comparing anatomy, using the fossil record, looking at biochemistry, observing artificial selection, and looking at the differences between animals across the world. I hope I explained this well. I tried to simplify it as much as I could without losing details, but if anything confuses you, one of the best ways to learn is by researching it yourself. which is super easy when we live in a time where the answer to any question is only a few clicks away. If you notice I got any facts wrong, or if research updates sometime in the future, feel free to correct me and I'll make a note of it in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video and hopefully you learned something new. Have an amazing day, and maybe you'll see me again if I ever decide to upload on my own. Toodles!